through the air, but they flew very carefully as they were carrying their precious sister. Their journey was a pleasant one, but just before sunset, many black clouds appeared, and it looked as if there was going to be a violent storm. "Hurry, hurry!" cried Elise to her brothers. "Flap your wings faster, or you'll turn into human beings, and we'll all crash to the ground and be drowned." By now, a fierce gale was blowing, and the sun had sunk so far down that it was almost below the horizon. Elise was terrified. The poor girl was so busy looking at the sun setting that she didn't realize the swans were darting towards a rock below. With a small bump, they all landed on a tiny island. They were just in time. A few seconds later, the swans turned into princes again. The waves dashed around the little rock, and great thunderclaps could be heard in the sky, but they all felt secure on the island. The next morning, when the princes turned into swans once again, they flew away with Elise. "Where are we going today, my brothers?" she asked, but they didn't answer. They just flew away with her until they reached the cloud palace of Morgana, the fairy queen. When they had landed safely, her brothers turned into princes again, and Elise was so tired that she soon fell asleep. And while she slept, she dreamt that Morgana said this to her: "Your brothers can be set free. You see this stinging nettle I have here? There are many growing in the palace gardens. If you pick them and crush them, you can make them into flax, and with this you must weave 11 shirts for your brothers. If you throw these over the 11 wild swans, the spell will be broken. But," continued Morgana, "it is very, very important that while you are weaving, you do not talk to your brothers. Any word you utter while you are doing this work will stab your brothers like a knife." And when Morgana had said this, she touched Elise's hand with a nettle and woke her up. So the next morning, when the princes turned into swans again and flew away, she searched for nettles. She did exactly what Morgana had told her to do, and crushed all the nettles with her bare feet, turning them into green flax. All day she worked at weaving the flax into shirts. After sunset, her brothers returned, but they were surprised to see Elise so silent. Whenever her brothers asked her a question, she just looked at them with sad eyes. She spent all night working, and all the next day she continued to work. One shirt had been finished already, and she was about to start the second. Later that day, when Elise was resting, she saw a horseman coming towards her. He was wearing a crown. "What are you doing here, beautiful child?" said the horseman. But Elise daren't speak. "I am the king of the land," he said. "Let me take you back to my magnificent palace. I will dress you in the most beautiful silk and velvet gowns and give you jewelry made of gold and precious diamonds." Elise didn't want to be taken away, but she didn't want to upset the king either. So she sat on the back of his horse and let him take her away. And when they reached the king's palace, she was taken to one of the grandest rooms. But she wasn't happy there. She wanted to go back to her simple life in the cave and finish making the shirts for her brothers. The king saw how unhappy she was and thought she might be a little homesick. So he showed her to a special room where she was to sleep. It was decorated in a way that made it look like the cave where she had been working. On the floor was the bundle of flax she had spun from the nettles, and from the ceiling hung the shirt she had already finished. "I hope this makes you feel at home," said the king. "Here is the work that was keeping you busy. You can carry on with it if you like." This made Elise smile, so in the hope that she might save her brothers, every night she worked at making the shirts. Every day she became more and more fond of the king and longed to tell him about her troubles. But she knew that if she spoke, her brothers would meet a terrible fate. The king followed Elise throughout the palace, hoping that eventually she would speak to him. He was a very patient man and didn't get angry with her. One day, Elise went for a walk in the palace gardens, and when she was out walking, she saw a group of horrible-looking witches sitting in a circle. They were clothed in the dirtiest rags and kept clawing at the air with their horrible skinny fingers. The eyes of the evil-looking creatures seemed to bore straight into her, so she gathered up the stinging nettles quickly and ran away as fast as she could. But as she was running away, she heard one of the creatures muttering,
"That girl is not what she appears. She is a witch, and she has taken in the king and all his subjects."
On hearing these cruel words, Elise was so upset and frightened that she burst into tears. Soon rumors started to spread about Elise. "Have you heard that the girl is really a witch?" the king would hear people whisper. And when he heard this, he would rush past with his hands over his ears, shouting, "I don't believe you! You're all talking absolute nonsense!" "But I have heard Elise muttering about a magic spell," the archbishop told the king. And eventually the archbishop convinced the king that it was his duty to have Elise beheaded. The poor thing was placed upon a cart and taken to the market square for the execution. Elise tried to remain calm because she had almost finished the 11 shirts. All that remained to be finished was one sleeve of one of the shirts. But then, above the noise of the jeering crowds, Elise heard the familiar flapping sound. The swans had come to save her. Elise quickly threw the 11 shirts over the swans, and the swans turned into her brothers once more. But the youngest brother still had a swan's wing instead of an arm, for he had been given the shirt with the missing sleeve. At last, Elise was free to speak. "Listen to me," she said. "I am innocent. I have broken a spell that was put on my brothers by a wicked witch." And when the king saw the 11 handsome princes standing in the city square, he bowed down to her and asked for her humble apologies. Then the church bells rang, and the king asked Elise to be his bride. So they were married straight away, and the 11 princes were, of course, the guests of honor.